Going guys, that's Kremp again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Attach confirmed his retirement just the other day, but that does not mean that his retirement might be final from competitive Call of Duty. There's been lots of talk over the last few days if Jetpack's return, as is seriously rumoured, at least in some form, for the upcoming Call of Duty titles. Some of these old fellas might be back in the league. Formal has of course hinted at it over the last couple of years. We've had iLLeY mentioned over the last few days, and even Attach doesn't rule it out either if Black Ops 7 lives up to many expectations. What do you guys think in the comments below? Does this league need expansion? If these players are going to return, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Some Lionman Cards here to begin with. This is Toronto. They placed top 6, and well, it's got to be noted that over the course of this stage, Insight was a 64 rated card. I mean, that is abysmal right now. Now look, Insight's cards are never great because he doesn't play at a great pace, and look, it's a Lionman card, so take it with a pinch of salt. The other guys, like, these guys play at a fast pace and they play on fast maps. So that's why, you know, their ratings are generally pretty good. But also it's because Insight is just slow and therefore the other guys have more kills, one might argue. CleanX, despite not an amazing KD, in terms of impact and kills and damage and stuff, you know, he was 94 rated. Beans, despite not really feeling like he had a great stage, but his search and destroy was really good. He had a 1.2 with, you know, near enough in, you know, 95s in both of the kills and damage per round categories. Control, you know, he's not been as good as I expected him to be in control this season, Beans, but in terms of ticks per round and damage, he's been good. It's the hard point that's been letting him down a bit, but he has been picking up some hill time, letting CleanX go rogue. So, you know, it's interesting because on paper, you could debate, I think, this stage, who was better between Beans and Insight. I would have said Beans was better between the two of them, but I wouldn't have said the difference was this mega in terms of the card rating. But that's how it is, because Insight plays slow. He's always going to get punished on the Lionman cards. That's the way that the rating works. But, like, this is especially bad, right? Especially because the search and destroy was their downfall, really, this stage. And it was, you know, JoeDeceives very surprisingly, but also Insight, who's really good in that mode historically, who had a really difficult time. So, it's very interesting to think about whether this team has been, or will continue to be, I don't know, compromised by the Mercury situation. Whether, like, it doesn't seem to have massively affected Beans, but there is a good argument to say that in hindsight, although at the time, as I said, I don't think they necessarily made a bad decision on the evidence they had, but certainly in hindsight you might look at this and say, well, maybe Insight could have gone, Mercury's could have stayed, whatever the case is. But that's what they decided to do, and maybe it's not working out for them as planned at the end of the season. This was the Rockers stage. They gave it a good go, right? Like, Nero actually went insane. Like, his performance at the major, I mean, you don't often see cards with 3 stats in the 99s, as in best in category in league. Nero was most kills per 10, most damage per 10, and most damage per 10 in control across the respawn modes. I know a lot of that was to do with the major. They played a lot of Vault and he dropped 50 every map. But like, it was actually kind of ridiculous how well he was playing at the major. Still wasn't good enough in the end. Kenny, though, was their second best player, I would say, this stage, and I think the cards kind of justify that as well. And Estriel was, you know, obviously probably worse than expected maybe, and they just didn't quite have enough in any of the game modes. They gave it a good go. They needed to win more search and destroys early on. I wonder what they do from here in terms of, because, you know, this team of 4 probably should have been better in terms of executing and scoring points than they actually were. But even now that they've not made it to champs and they're going to be at the World Cup, what do you do, right? Because, look, Rocker are backed by G2. That's part of the org. And they're based out of Texas. So, you know, for someone like Kenny, because Kenny is, I think still, and the discussion that I had with Temp at the major was that actually Kenny's stock hasn't really changed, or maybe has even gone up. I don't know, because people were wondering, should he have come back? Like, should he have even returned? Should he have come back to Rocker? Because if he's come back to Rocker, he's played all right, but they've not gone to champs. So in the head of the fans, that might be hurting his stock. People might say, oh, you know, Kenny shouldn't have come back. But actually, according to the players, it either hasn't mattered or it's actually been a positive for his stock. So that is the theory anyway, that Kenny is going to have no issues staying in this league pretty much wherever he wants to go, apart from the real top teams that won't look to sign him. But Kenny's observation would also be he'll want to stay in Texas, because that's where he's from, that's where family is. He won't want to join a team like Surge and have to move up to Vancouver, right? Like, that's not going to be on Kenny's radar. So Rocker potentially makes a fair bit of sense to continue on as an organisation for Kenny, and And if that continues to be the case, then maybe this does make sense as an org. But if that's true, then they're probably going to build around Kenny. So what would he do? Like, what changes would he make? Because Estriel, I would say out of the three, is maybe the player with the most promise in terms of consistency. You know, give it 2 years. Who's going to be the best player out of Geo, Estriel, and Nero? Likely it's going to be Estriel, but he wasn't really great since Kenny joined the team. And the other guys are also solid with a lot of potential too. So I don't know, like, if you're Kenny and you get given the keys, what do you do for the World Cup? I really don't have a good answer for you on that question right now. Some channels going down, Kremp was getting involved, Drazah and Kremp, you know, we know these guys are, sometimes they beef each other, sometimes they have good fun on the same team, they were playing some chals. There's also this, and I don't know if the Warzone community is going to get into what we've had in like the CDL for years, but during the Esports World Cup in Riyadh for Warzone, which is 6th to 9th of August, there will be an update on the 7th of August, the Season 5 update, which is going to be presumably very game-changing indeed to the state of the game, the meta, like all these other factors that they usually change as well. Now, this is funny, like, if you guys remember back in the day, Call of Duty tournaments would occasionally happen on a weekend or a patch would drop. They would literally drop the patch during the weekends, and then the Saturday, Sunday would play different. Like, there was a famous tournament, I forget exactly which one it was, you guys will know. There's a famous tournament in Infinite Warfare, we're talking 2017, where on Friday in group play, the uplink portal on Throwback was in a different spot to what it was in on Saturday. They'd literally moved it. So people were going for these one lineups that they had to throw the ball into the portal and get a one hit and, you know, a 1 point throw. They were nailing them on Friday. They turned up Saturday morning and were like, now we can't hit this one to save our life. And it turned out they moved the portal midweekend. So that's the stuff that used to happen in COD. And I don't know if it's going to happen in Warzone here, but they've got to think about exactly what that looks like. But the big question I wanted to raise for you guys today was about those, you know, jetpack games, right? Maybe jetpacks are going to make a return. Maybe they're going to be back in Call of Duty in the near future. We know that recently wall running was spotted in the build for BO6 and therefore potentially BO7 as well. You can wall run, and you can even potentially double jump. There's been a big theory that some advanced movement is going to return in this upcoming title. Now, initially, when they did the jetpack era, AW, BO3, Infinite Warfare, they admitted they went too far with doing those games 2 in a row. They may decide they are going to do jetpacks again or advanced movements to just do 1 in a row and evaluate, right? Maybe because the game after this upcoming game is probably going to be an Infinity Ward game. It's probably not going to have anything special in it. It might not even have Omni movement. Who knows? This is how Infinity Ward roll, unfortunately. As much as I think this has been a positive step for COD, the changes that Trek have made here for BO6. But that was the theory. And the other day, iLLeY tweeted about this. I'm pretty certain he tweeted, I swear I looked at it in a video, he tweeted, like, look, if it's a jetpack game, I want to come back. And look at his tweets now, I can't actually see it. So, because of course he tweeted about his retirement the other day, but I'm pretty sure he said, in replies to some tweet anyway, that if it was a jetpack game, I would consider coming back. And the same thing Attach says. Of course, Attach now called it a day the other day, and look, totally understandable, I think, why Attach decided to call time on his career at the moment.
Joe X Attach, that's an insane duo right there. I'm getting another chip, and then I'm retiring right after. I'm going back into retirement after I get my chip. Then I'm hanging it back up. Fucking crazy duo right there. Are you retiring again? Shit, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll finish it out. If it's a jetpack game, if it's a fun game, I'll keep playing. If it was a fun game, I might be interested. But if I gotta play Protocol again, like, fuck.
But there have been many pros that have been really excited. I mean, look, if you ask the players, do they prefer jetpacks or boots? 85% of them will tell you jetpacks. And that is true for many of the retired players as well. You know, more skill gap. The games back then were more fun. Look, you put jetpacks in these modern games. Does it make the game so much better? Maybe not. But it does allow the opportunity for uplink as a game mode to come back. And I think there are many players that if jetpacks were back, I don't think Attach would have looked to retire. And honestly, yes, he's retired. But if jetpacks do come back for the new title and he really wants to play, you know, look, he could have a couple of conversations. That could also be true for a guy like iLLeY. That could also be true potentially for a guy like Formal as well. We know that Formal stepped away from COD a couple of years ago, but I think he has made it relatively clear that coming back to COD is at least a consideration, right? I mean, last year there was talk with Nadeshot. Nadeshot was saying, hey, Matthew, like, come to 100 Thieves, I'll give you the keys if you want to play COD again. And Formal, you know, for a couple of reasons, doesn't really want to do that. The Halo circuit is different in many ways, better for Formal in many ways. They only scrim like once a day. It's not, you know, on some level, it's not as serious as COD. It's actually kind of a perfect game for Formal to go back to, having grinded for years in COD. And also, does he really want to be stuck playing online qualifiers in Call of Duty again? look, I don't think Formal would come back unless the conditions were right, but he at least played around with the idea, and he's also played around with the idea of retiring from Halo, because, you know, Halo Infinite's been out a few years. Does he really want to play this game again for another year? Certainly what he wants to do this year is win the World Championship again, and if he can do that, then I think he might just decide to call it a day. I mean, last year he was considering it probably as well, just retiring, but he said, look, if I don't get the roster that I want, I'm not going to play. He got the roster that he wanted. Now he's playing, but what does that mean for the future, right? Because after another year of competing in Halo Infinite, he might decide, you know what, like, I've had enough of this and I want to either just call it a day, or, you know, hypothetically, Halo Infinite, maybe Formal wins the Halo World Championship, steps away at the absolute pinnacle of the game, the new COD comes out, it's jetpacks, and he says, all right, let's run it back. Now, look, is Formal gonna, where would Formal go? I think that's the other big question for me with the Formal discussions, is always, well, he doesn't, like, he'd want to play for OpTic, right? But is that really going to happen? Certainly last year and this year, like, absolutely not. But as it stands, I mean, it does get kind of interesting, just because the OpTic, obviously, COD team has been struggling this year. But, like, what's going to happen, right? Like, there's no way that Formal's going to come in and they're going to get rid of Dashy for Formal, right? Like, surely that wouldn't make any sense. And, like, that's his boy. So, but also, would they want to play with each other again? They did that in Cold War, it didn't really work. So, I think that's the difficulty with the Formal discussions. It's kind of difficult to imagine how he could come back and it would actually make sense and work, as much as I think we'd love to see it. But there are a number of pro players. And the rumours around jetpacks, by the way, like, this isn't just nothing, right? Like, as far as I understand, like, there will be something like this. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but there will be some sort of advanced movement in the upcoming game. Whether it's going to be jetpacks like Advanced Warfare, whether it's going to be wall running jetpacks like BO3, even Infinite Warfare. Infinite Warfare was arguably the most toned down, and in many respects, one might argue the best of the movement that we had. It's just the game wasn't as well liked as BO3, and, you know, of course, Advanced Warfare before that as well. People were getting fed up of Infinite Warfare, but I do think it's one of the more underrated CODs ever, and I'm sure Formal might agree on that assessment, having won the World Championship on that game. But very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. You know, because Uplink as well, it's been a big debate. We talked about it with Slasher on the couch of the Major. You know, what game mode is the best third mode? Nobody really has a good answer to that question. We talk about Capture the Flag. Of course, Control's been in the game for a long time, but hasn't really delivered, I would argue, in recent years. And then there's Uplink, right? There's the possibility of Uplink making a return. And, you know, if you've got... It would be very difficult to do with no jetpacks, right? We talked about whether you could either have it like Gridiron from World War II when the portal is on the ground and you run through it. That doesn't really hit the same because the one lineups aren't the same either. Like, jetpacks allowed interesting lineups of one-point throws. And that was, I think, one of the key factors to make an uplink work. And also, you need the possibility to intercept as well. I think that's another key element of play. If wall running is there, then it allows the option, right? Because then you could have a wall near the portal, potentially, that could get added in, that you could then wall run on to jump into the point. If you've got a double jump, then that obviously helps things as well. You know, we talked back in the day about could you add a trampoline, right? Like, but hopefully that won't be necessary. So very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.